everybody says, inflammation is the cause of disease, and inflammation is the cause of brain issues, dementia. Inflammation is the cause of heart disease. That's very true. But where the heck did the inflammation come from? And the inflammation is actually coming from our white blood cells.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion, and I have with me today the famous Dr. Stephen Gundry. He's one of the world's top cardiothoracic surgeons and a pioneer in nutrition. He's the host of the Dr. Gundry Podcast and the founder and director of the International Heart and Lung Institute Center for Restorative Medicine and the founder of Gundry MD. After a distinguished surgical career as a professor and chairman of cardiothoracic surgery at Loma Lima University, Dr. Gundry changed his focus to curing modern diseases via dietary changes. He is the author of the New York Times bestsellers The Plant Paradox, The Plant Paradox Cookbook, The Plant Paradox Quick and Easy, and The Longevity Paradox, along with national bestsellers The Plant Paradox Family Cookbook, The Energy Paradox, Dr. Gundry's Diet Evolution, and Unlocking the Keto Code. He will also be releasing his next book, Gut Check, Unleash the Power of Your Microbiome to Reverse Disease and Transform Your Mental, Physical, and Emotional Health on January 2024. So obviously, we talked about many of these topics on today's show, and with any dietary suggestions, first and foremost, listen to your body and let your body be your guide. And if what Dr. Gundry suggested in our interview, if it resonated with you, or you tried many things and nothing helped, then maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's time to step up and try something new, because your body is very important. It's the only one you got. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello, Dr. Gundry. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes. Before we begin, can you please share one of your best childhood memories with me?
Best childhood memories, huh? Actually, one of my best was discovering a book in my elementary school library when I was 10 years old that was called All About You, and it was a book about the human body. And I picked it up and read it and decided that day I was going to be a doctor. In fact, my fourth grade science project was how to do an appendectomy, complete with illustrations that I drew myself. So there you go. That was a favorite childhood memory.
That's amazing. And since then, you are a dedicated doctor. You started pretty early, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. And how did you discover your passion? How did you become the Dr. Gundry we know today, and focus on the things you are focused on today?
I always had a great deal of curiosity about how things work, how things happened. And, I became a famous heart surgeon, and that's started pediatric heart transplantation with my partner Leonard Bailey long ago. And but it was a guy well over 25 years ago now who I call Big Ed in all my books, who had inoperable coronary artery disease. And by that, I mean that all the blood vessels in his heart were clogged up. They were so clogged that you couldn't put stents in them. You couldn't do bypasses because there wasn't any place to put a bypass. And this guy had spent 6 months eating differently and taking some supplements from a health food store. And remarkably, in 6 months' time, he cleaned out 50% of the blockages in his coronary arteries. And I had his old angiogram and his new angiogram, and I'd never seen anything like that. And it was supposedly impossible. So I set out to figure out how he did that, and I experimented on myself to start with, and I spent the last 25 years teaching people that their fate is actually in their hands and in their mouth and in their gut, and that you can change things if you really want, just by making a few changes. And that's what I do. I still see patients 6 days a week, even on the weekends. I've got a full clinic this Saturday and Sunday, and so it's kind of fun.
The patients that you see, what do you help them with? The leaky gut, or what other issues?
Yeah, you name it. Whatever they walk through the door with, I'm willing to take it on. About 80% of my patients now have an autoimmune disease, which I can assure them and you that it's from leaky gut and intestinal dysbiosis, which is a fancy way of saying that their microbiome is all screwed up. But that's the vast majority of my patients. I treat cancer patients. I treat heart disease patients, obesity. You name it, we'll take it on.
Wow. And do you think everything stems from your microbiome, from your gut?
Well, I think, Hippocrates 2,500 years ago said all disease begins in the gut. And the longer I do this, the longer I think he's right. You could probably rephrase it that all disease begins in a leaky gut. And I think that's probably a better way to rephrase it. But it's remarkable that these things all come from an area that we've only really recently discovered even existed. Back when I was in medical school, we didn't know that there was this microbiome that these 100 trillion bacteria that live inside of us that actually have a great deal of interest in keeping their home alive. We had no idea that there was a synergistic communication between them and us, and our job was to feed them and give them what they needed, and they in turn, we didn't know, job was to take care of their home and to give us things we needed. Who would have guessed? Well, Hippocrates knew.
How would you define leaky gut? What is it exactly? I know it's something about the walls of your gut and things can go through, but maybe you can give me a more educated explanation.
Well, yeah, if you had asked me 20 years ago what I thought about leaky gut, I probably would have said it was pseudoscience. But thanks to some great research, particularly by Dr. Alessio Fasano, who is a pediatric gastroenterologist. He's originally from Italy. He's now at Harvard, and he's the one who really figured out that the wall of the gut has, in a way, a kind of a bad design. The wall of our gut is, it's about 20 feet long, but if we flattened it all out, it would be the surface area of a tennis court inside of us.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that big. So when everybody's watching the Australian Open right now, there's a tennis court that's inside of us. And that tennis court, unfortunately, the wall of the gut is only one cell thick. And I'm going to turn my hand this way. So there's only one cell between everything we swallow and us. And so those cells, because there's only one cell thickness, are locked with, if you will, glue that are called tight junctions. And so it's sealed. And normally, the only way food gets through is it has to be broken down into sugars, fats, and proteins, amino acids. And then it's absorbed through the wall of the gut. But it's not supposed to get through that way. Well, Dr. Fasano discovered that compounds, certain plant compounds like gluten, which is a lectin, can attach to the wall of the gut to a receptor. And that receptor makes a compound called zonulin, and there won't be a test, I promise. Zonulin hits another receptor and breaks that glue. So now there's a gap between these two cells. And through that gap, bacteria can come through, pieces of bacteria can come through, even pieces of undigested food can come through. Now, what's interesting is on the other side of the gut, 80% of all of our white blood cells are present. Why? Because this is where trouble can come through, and we basically want our army to be ready when something comes through. So we now know that this happens actually quite frequently, but that the gut can seal back up and the army can hopefully take care of these guys coming across the wall every now and then. But what's happened to most of us is that these leaks are happening literally every day, multiple times a day. And this army, which normally would become interested every now and then and damp down the things, now is constantly at war, and it's constantly battling things coming across the wall of the gut. And that's where inflammation comes from. Everybody says, inflammation is the cause of disease, and inflammation is the cause of brain issues, dementia. Inflammation is the cause of heart disease. That's very true. But where the heck did the inflammation come from? And the inflammation is actually coming from our white blood cells being on high alert from leaky gut. Exactly how Hippocrates predicted so long ago. So that's leaky gut.
Yeah. What are the symptoms of? Thank you. The symptoms of leaky gut. You said chronic diseases, but before you go into chronic diseases and start researching, I'm sure there are some telltale signs that are in the earlier stages. What are they?
I'm glad you asked. A lot of people don't recognize these signs because they think it's just a part of modern living. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I saw a young woman, 42 years old, who has Parkinson's disease in her 40s. Young.
Wow.
Yeah, I see a lot of young Parkinson's patients. And when we started talking about her history, she said, well, it's interesting. I've always had a funny tummy, as she said. She said, I've always had issues with my tummy. I had tummy trouble. That could be constipation. It could be diarrhea. It could be bloating. It could be cramping. But she always noticed that was an issue. And sure enough, we now know that Parkinson's actually doesn't start in the brain. Parkinson's starts in the gut and from leaky gut.
Can you reverse it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I see, if you catch it, and I think Dr. Dale Bredesen, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, who's become a friend of mine, would say the same thing. If you catch these things early enough, they're definitely reversible. You can certainly, if you catch it in its mid-course, you can stop it and have it not progress. But when you catch it late, like full-blown Parkinson's or full-blown Alzheimer's, then it's very difficult to reverse it at that point. But you can certainly put a halt to the progression. Now, the good news about autoimmune disease is it's almost always reversible. In fact, I've published several papers showing that within 9 months to a year of starting with an autoimmune disease person, that the autoimmune disease marker, like Hashimoto's, like rheumatoid arthritis, like Crohn's, like lupus, will go into remission, will reverse. And you can show that the leaky gut has reversed and the leaky gut is sealed. Now, does it take a while? Yes, it does. You can't go from leaky gut and wish it away in 2 weeks. When I first started doing this over 20 years ago, I was a bit naive. And you could turn it around real quick. Now, with sophisticated tests that we do every 3 months, blood tests, it takes 6 months, 9 months, a year to completely reverse these things. But it's reversible.
Yeah, that's amazing. A lot of time you go to doctors and they just say, "Hey, you're stuck with this for life, and it's a chronic disease, and it's chronic and it's irreversible." So it's very refreshing to hear your opinion on that and to hear your success stories.
I like to. There's a fun story I like to tell. I have a physician assistant who usually sees the new patients first, and then I see them usually 3 to 6 months after she sees them. And so I saw a lady in her 50s who came to us with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and my physician assistant saw her and put her on our program. And so I was seeing her for the first time 6 months later, and I luckily had seen her blood work. And it's true that she had markers for Hashimoto's the first time we saw her, but in 6 months, she no longer had markers for Hashimoto's. They were all normal. So when I walked in, I said, nice to meet you. Since this is our first time, tell me a little bit about yourself. And she said, well, I'm here to see you because I have Hashimoto's. And I said, well, no, you don't. And she said, well, yes, I do. That's why I'm here. And I said, well, yeah, you used to have Hashimoto's, but you don't anymore. And I held up her labs and showed it to her. And she said, oh my gosh. And, she started crying and we hugged. But again, you're right. People say, oh, you have an autoimmune disease, nothing you can do about it, and we'll manage it. But that's the good news is that that's not the case.
So it seems like with our standard diet, everyone has leaky gut to a certain extent.
True.
Yeah. What are the worst foods to eat that we absolutely have to cut out of our diets?
Well, I think one of the things, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but one of the things that 100% of people who have leaky gut react to is the various components of wheat, rye, barley, oats. 100% of them have antibodies to gluten, to wheat germ agglutinin, which is in the hull of wheat, whole wheat. 100% of people. Now, so that's one thing. The other remarkable thing is that 70% of people have antibodies to corn. And sadly, so many gluten-free foods.
Wow.
Yeah, 70% of people. Yeah, corn. Yeah, and that's why, as I've written, there's studies looking at people who have celiac disease, which is the extreme form in gluten intolerance. And people are put on a gluten-free diet. And yet, after a year and a half in one study on a gluten-free diet, 70% of people still had celiac disease with intestinal biopsy, which is the gold standard, even though they were eating gluten-free. The problem is, as I've shown and found, is that so many gluten-free foods are also troublemakers, like corn, like quinoa, like buckwheat.
All the things I love to eat.
Oh, and don't get me wrong. I grew up in Nebraska. All we grow is corn. These things, unfortunately, are some of the biggest triggers to our problems. And even Dr. Terry Walls, who I think most people know, really reversed her wheelchair-bound multiple sclerosis by getting these foods out of her diet. And and she's from Iowa, a professor at Iowa, and my gosh, she's taking away all these comfort foods that all of us love, and I'm taking them away and seeing the same things. I mean, she reversed her MS, taking these foods away, and I get to see MS reversal all the time in my clinic as well.
I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old, and he loves quinoa and bread and grilled cheese sandwiches. Like all the things we ate as children. Like, does it matter? Because it feels like when I was younger, I was able to eat everything, and everything was totally fine. And I traveled a lot. I traveled over 40 countries, and one of my best favorite things to do was to try the cuisines and learn about the culture through food. And I ate everything. And now that I'm older, it's quite harder to like handle gluten. For example, I've been eating gluten in the last month a little too much, and I started developing this brain fog, and I'm pretty sure it has something to do with me overeating bread and cookies, because sometimes I eat it only once a week. Is it okay to eat it only once a week? What's your take on all that? How can I navigate my personal world and being a mom with your suggestions?
Well, you're right. There are a lot of places in the world where you can go that don't have glyphosate that's sprayed on all the crops. Unfortunately, glyphosate is Roundup, the active ingredient in Roundup. And almost all of our grains in the United States are sprayed with Roundup. They don't have to be genetically modified. They are normal grains, and they're sprayed before harvesting. So those grains, Roundup is really good at killing off the microbiome in us. And Roundup is really good at producing leaky gut as well, just by itself. And so I have a lot of patients who we can reverse their leaky gut by taking away these foods initially. And they'll go over to, say, France or Italy, and they'll eat a croissant, and they'll eat the baguette, and they'll have the pasta and the pizza, and they
Yes,
don't react.
Yes.
And they go, wow, Dr. Gundry's cured me. Yeah, there's no Roundup over there. And then they come back and they start eating our stuff.
Right.
And all of a sudden they've got brain fog, or their psoriasis pops out on their elbow, and they go, what the heck? I thought I was cured. Well, no, they're re-exposed to Roundup. So there are ways, there's tricks that can be done. For instance, quinoa can be pressure cooked, makes it perfectly safe. Buckwheat can be pressure cooked, makes it perfectly safe.
Oh, really? Okay, good. Let's talk about that. For cooking. What else?
Yeah, and there's lots of alternative pastas. Well, so for instance, you can have sorghum pasta, you can have millet pasta, which, for instance, my wife and I just had sorghum pasta with pesto sauce for dinner night before last with a great big salad, and it's delicious. And sorghum and millet don't have any lectins in them; they don't have any hull. And it's real easy to find this stuff in a lot of the grocery stores now. And I wrote a whole cookbook using an Instant Pot for mothers like yourself, the Plant Paradox Family Cookbook.
Oh, I didn't know about that book. Good to know.
Oh, yeah, get that. It was written for you.
Thank you. Thank you for writing a book for me.
You want to take care of your family. You want to be able to take care of yourself. You're busy. And an Instapot is really a great way to detoxify all these compounds.
Yeah, I have an Instapot for the last 4 years and it just sits there. So maybe it's time to use it.
Now, the other thing you can do, a lot of people say, it's too much trouble. But for instance, beans are also mischievous for most people. But if you pressure cook beans or traditionally ferment them the way they used to be, then they're safe. And there are a couple companies that pressure cook their beans. Eden Brand does it, and another company out of Italy called Jovial, like a happy person, also makes pressure cooked beans. So I've got a whole shelf of these things in our pantry, and you don't even need an Instapot. You just open the can of beans or the glass jar of beans, and you're ready to go. So, and people say, "Oh, Dr. Gundry hates beans, and Dr. Gundry hates these things." No, you just have to know how to diffuse them, how to make them acceptable, and you have to know which plants don't like you and which plants like you, and and if they don't like you, how to detoxify them. So those tricks, I talk about in every one of my books, including the new one, Gut Check.
Yes, gotcha. So you talked about the gluten, the wheat in Italy and France, and but which does not have glyphosates, but it's got lectin in it.
Part of the problem that's been shown by Consumer Reports and the Environmental Working Group is that a lot of our organic products, like organic oats, still have glyphosate in them. And that's because, unfortunately, glyphosate Roundup is sprayed. And it's sprayed on fields and it drifts.
Yeah, it can just blow in the wind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I know a winemaker in Santa Barbara County who has biodynamic wine, and that's one step beyond organic. And he's got this one vineyard on his map that he doesn't certify as organic or biodynamic. And I go, well, why? It's right there. And he says, well, you see, it's right at the corner of our property. And my neighbor sprays his field with glyphosate for weed control. And it drifts. And so I can't certify it. And number one, I sell off these grapes because I won't use them. But I can't stop him. And that it's a really good example. This stuff just drifts.
Yeah, it's really difficult. Well, in my personal life, I try to eat organic, I eat grass-fed. I try to buy from local farms. So I'm doing the best I can, and I still sometimes really enjoy eating outside. Eating in restaurants and going to friends' homes and eating what they are serving to me. So, how do you navigate that?
Well, long ago, our gut microbiome was really good at breaking down these substances, these plant compounds that didn't like us. For instance, there are bacteria that eat gluten. There are bacteria that eat oxalates, and oxalates are a big deal now, but we used to have bacteria that would eat these. In fact, in Gut Check, I talk about super old people have bacteria that actually eat what are called xenobiotics, plastics, and things like that, and these endocrine disruptors that I write about.
Can I just insert that bacteria into my gut?
Well, that's how Gut Check works.
Can you just like have a bacteria capsule and
Yeah,
yeah.
you
Okay.
not only have to know which bacteria are the good guys and which are the bad guys, but part of Gut Check is it's not that simple. I wish it was. You actually have to have messages from other bacteria and products that other bacteria make so that the good guys have other things to eat to allow them to thrive. The expression is it takes a village. So sadly, you can't just swallow, oh, I want a bacteria that'll eat oxalate. So I'll find that bacteria and I'll swallow it as a capsule and I'll be fine. It unfortunately doesn't work that way. And part of Gut Check is we have to have this incredible, teeming, tropical rainforest of all these different species of bacteria, very much like all the species in a tropical rainforest that interact and intermingle and depend on each other. And if we don't have that, then just swallowing one probiotic or swallowing one prebiotic fiber that bacteria might want to eat isn't going to make much difference. And that's what almost every day researchers like myself find out that oops, it takes more than just swallowing one or two different bugs. I make the joke, one of my offices is in Palm Springs, which is in the desert. And I could sell my patients grass seed, for instance. And they'd come back in 2 months and say, you sold me bad grass seed. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, I sprinkled it out on the desert and it didn't grow. And I go, well, did you water it? No, you didn't tell me to. Well, did you fertilize it? No, you didn't tell me to. I said, well, why would it grow? And the same thing happens, we're beginning to realize. It's one thing to swallow probiotics, friendly bacteria. It's one thing to swallow prebiotic fiber, which friendly bacteria like to eat. But it takes far more than that. You actually have to send them messages and you have to get this tropical rainforest that unfortunately we've killed off through the processes that I talk about in the book. And I think that's actually why it takes so long to, seal a leaky gut, to get this community established. I mean, living in California, we lived through wildfires and the forest burns down. Now, even if we plant little seedlings, it'll take 20 years to reestablish that forest. And I think we've been very naive that we constantly burn down our tropical rainforests through the foods we eat and the antibiotics that we take or the antibiotics that have been fed to our animals. And we've been naive that we could rebuild that tropical rainforest by swallowing a probiotic capsule.
Yes, I think what I self-diagnosed myself with leaky gut about 2 years ago. It was after we traveled a lot. My diet was horrible. I had tons of gluten, and I came back to the States with, my goodness. I remember that evening on the floor where my gut was hurting so much. I was crying, like my tummy was like I was in so much pain. And what helped me was drinking celery juice every morning. What do you think about that one? And I tried spore biotics, and it made it worse. It made it so much worse.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So even friendly bacteria. So remember, with leaky gut, you literally have gaps, and your bacteria are supposed to stay in their space. But if you have leaky gut, if you have gaps, then even friendly bacteria can actually cross, and your immune system goes, wait a minute, that's a bacteria. I hate bacteria. They're supposed to be over there. And I'm going to cause inflammation. I'm going to make all this area red and raw. And so you're right. Just the idea of, let's swallow some good bacteria. If you got leaky gut, it can backfire.
Yes, it did. Definitely did. And I think the what caused that was I was eating like I love kimchi. Now I can eat it, but I got some kimchi from Whole Foods and I ate it, and that day it started. So maybe it was just like my gut biome was already not very harmonious, and just adding that kimchi fermented bacteria, which is a great bacteria, to all that made it just like I don't know, made chaos with all the good intention of that good bacteria.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of times, again, I talk about this in the book, even bad bacteria actually have a place in our microbiome. I like to use the example in Yellowstone Park a number of years ago. Wolves were eradicated. They were shot, killed because wolves are bad. Remember? And once this evil, nasty predator was gone, the elk overgrew. They ate all the saplings. There were no saplings for the beavers to use to build beaver dams. These little pools where other animals fed and ate were gone, and the whole ecosystem fell apart. And
Everything collapsed. Yes.
yeah, everything collapsed because of removing this bad wolf. So they put the wolves back in, and lo and behold, it took 20 years, but now the ecosystem is back to normal.
I've never been to Yellowstone Park. I really want to go.
You got to go. It's one of our great national treasures. So well worth the trip.
And so, what helped me was celery juice. What do you think about celery juice, and why did it help me so much?
So celery juice, I'm not a big fan of celery juice, only because there's a condition called celery pickers disease. Celery has a compound there called sorolins that can actually damage the lining of your hands. They literally get burns on their hands. So I'm not a big fan of celery juice, but it is a way of having some prebiotic fiber, and perhaps that was the benefit you were getting from celery. Most of the time, eating celery is a whole lot better for you than juicing celery, and that goes for most juices.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't getting the fiber because I was juicing.
I know, that's what I mean. You're much better.
So it was something in the celery juice itself.
Well, there still is fiber in celery juice, but not as much as if you eat the entire celery stalk.
Right. Okay. What are your thoughts about the carnivore diet? Like, what diet do you recommend the most? What should we eat?
Well, I recommend the plant paradox diet or the gut check diet. Carnivore diet is an elimination diet. Some people have accused me of actually being the father of the carnivore diet, because the carnivore diet eliminates all plant compounds. And people don't realize that there are a lot of plant compounds that are really good for us, but there are certain plant compounds that are mischievous, that we shouldn't be eating, or we should at least tame them or detoxifying them. We will use an elimination diet on some of my real troublemakers. But one of the things I've seen in people who stay on a carnivore diet is they may feel well, but we start seeing inflammatory markers in their blood start going up. And they're markers that most physicians don't measure. They're inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha and IL-6 and IL-16. And even though people say they feel well, we begin to see these inflammatory markers start going up. And to me, it actually makes a lot of sense, because this inflammation, our gut microbiome actually needs certain plant compounds to make short chain fatty acids like butyrate, like acetate, like propionate, to tell our immune system that they're pretty happy and that things are going great down in the gut. And if our immune system doesn't receive these messages, then they literally start walking around with an AK-47 and getting ready to shoot anything that looks hot.
What are your favorite fruits and veggies, and which one you will never touch?
Well, the nightshade family of vegetables have to be detoxified. So nightshade family are white potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and believe it or not, goji berries. So you can detoxify them by peeling and de-seeding them for the most part. And that's what I recommend with my patients. One thing that I continually stress is that long ago, we only had access to fruit once a year, usually during the summer and early fall. And we have a genetic mutation that we inherited from great apes that allows us to take fructose, the sugar in fruit, and convert it into fat and a compound called uric acid. And that allowed great apes to outcompete other monkeys when climate change happened long ago. And they were able to grow fat for the winter by eating seasonal fruit. And we used to be able to store fat for the winter by eating seasonal fruit. Now, however, we have fruit availability 365 days a year. And our fruit has been hybridized and modified for increased sugar content. And I mean, the names give it away. I was actually just in a market yesterday, and there's cotton candy grapes, and there's ambrosia apples, and honey crisp, and and these things, and even blueberries, even organic blueberries are the size of grapes now. So you have to be cautious with telling people how good fruit is, because fruit has changed. So I have nothing against fruit in season, but it's not 365 days a year of fruit season. I'm sorry. And we see in human studies that giving them a lot of daily fruit makes for fatty liver, makes for insulin resistance, makes for elevated insulin, metabolic syndrome. And if you take the fruit away from them, these things resolve. So fruit is called nature's candy for a reason.
Do you eat fruit in moderation?
Only in season. So for instance, I have some blackberry bushes in my yard, and they only have blackberries maybe 6 weeks out of the year. So I don't go to the store right now and buy blackberries because it's not season. Now I have a tangerine tree in my yard, and it's season, so I will have a tangerine, and they're little, and that's okay. But for instance, believe it or not, you can, here in Southern California, in Oxnard, down the street from me, they have strawberries in January. And these are great big, almost white, and they're so sweet. And you go, what the heck? Strawberries can't grow in January. Strawberries had a season in the summer, and you look forward to it. And now you can have strawberries in January. Well, that's not normal. And we have to realize that's not normal.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So I want to do a lightning round with you where I'm just going to mention names of foods and just get your quick thoughts of them.
Sure.
MCT oil.
So I love MCT oil. It's one great way for making ketones without having to worry about a ketogenic diet.
Sugar.
Sugar is poison. Almost all of our foods have hidden sugar, and I spend my time going through labels for my patients to show them where the sugar is hiding.
Collagen powder.
Absolute waste of your money.
Oh, really? Why?
A couple reasons. There's no directions for your body that, first of all, you have to break down the collagen into individual amino acids that you can absorb. There's no instructions on the other side of your intestine that you just ate collagen, and so you ought to reassemble those amino acids back into collagen. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. And collagen powder actually has a lot of amino acids that are really not very useful if you want to age properly. What I like people to do is get the amino acids from plants and then use vitamin C to make collagen out of these compounds rather than eating dead animal.
Okay, multivitamin.
You know, a multivitamin is a decent start, but it's not the end all. I would much rather have people spend their money on vitamin D and time to release vitamin C. Almost every human being I see with leaky gut has a low vitamin D level. The University of California, San Diego, a big vitamin D research center, says the average American should be taking 9,600 international units of vitamin D3 a day. And I completely agree with that.
9,000?
Yeah, I take 10,000 international units a day. That's what I start all my patients with.
And do you combine it with K2?
I like K2 a lot. You only need about 100 micrograms of K2, but if vitamin D, even at 10,000, you don't necessarily need K2.
Right. And what type of vitamins do you think everybody should take? And like as a generalization, of course, everybody needs to do their own blood tests and all that.
Right. So half the people in the world have one or two mutations of what are called the MTHFR genes, and they're unable to make methyl B12 and methylfolate properly. And so I think most people ought to be taking methyl B12 under their tongue and methylfolate. Most people should be taking time to release vitamin C. We're one of the few animals that do not manufacture.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Time release is oil-based vitamin C?
No, it's time release. It's you can get it either in capsules or tablets. Yeah, and it's called time release. There's a number of companies that manufacture it. When you swallow vitamin C, it's a water-soluble vitamin, and we excrete it after about 4 hours, and it's gone. So you have to kind of keep topping off. And vitamin C is absolutely essential for the health of our blood vessels and the health of our skin. And vitamin C is actually what knits collagen together. And the wrinkles that you see, for instance, in smokers, is because they deplete their vitamin C as binding with oxidative stress molecules. And those wrinkles are because they have no vitamin C to put their collagen back together.
Right. What are the best vitamins for kids?
Same way with kids. Most kids who I see with autoimmune diseases, and I see a lot of them, have very low vitamin D levels. And so if you're just going to make one change in your kids, give them vitamin D. And please, please, please don't give them the gummies because they're just sugar. There are a few gummies on the market that are not sugar based, but they're few and far between.
Okay. My little one is loving his gummies.
Of course he
All
does
right, no
because
more
it's
gummies.
sugar.
It's like he's like, Mom, I think this one we need two of those. You can't just have one. You need two of those. It's like he's so convincing. He's such a good little salesperson.
Of course, all of it. Remember, all of us are sugar addicts. Remember, a rat will press a bar for sugar, and he'll press a bar for more sugar more than he'll press a bar for cocaine. I mean, it's that good a drug. And we forget that. And your kid is telling you what a really good stuff. Yeah.
So good. What do you think about medicinal mushrooms like reishi and chaga and all those?
Mushrooms are actually great prebiotic fiber for gut bacteria. And all of these benefits that are attributed to mushrooms are actually because they foster a much more diverse microbiome. And that microbiome actually tells your immune system that things are pretty happy down in your gut. So I'm a big fan of mushrooms and mushroom powders, mushroom capsules, eating mushrooms. But I do warn people not to eat the white button mushroom unless you cook them because they have a rather mischievous compound in them. The cremini, the brown mushrooms are perfectly fine.
Good to know. Great to know. Ayurvedic herbs. Which one is your favorite? Cook the white mushrooms.
Yeah, cook the white mushrooms and then you'll be fine. Uh, too many to count. I guess I like ashwagandha a lot. There's also one of my favorites is magnolia bark extract. Um, so those are two of my favorite ones. You'll find magnolia bark extract in a pet. It's called Relora.
Relora. Okay. And I like maca too. I think it's really good. Wow, I wish I had more time with you, but I want to be respectful of your time. Before we say goodbye for now. What are your three top tips to living a stellar life?
Well, first of all, you have to get a dog. Dogs do wonderful things. They make you go outside twice a day, whether you want to or not. Um, we know that people who own dogs or outside cats have a much more diverse, rich microbiome than people who don't. And a rich, diverse microbiome is an incredibly important part of living a successful life. So get a dog. Get a rescue dog. We have 4 dogs. 2 of them are rescues, and you'll do them a favor. They'll do you a favor. So it's a win-win.
We have an outdoor cat that comes to visit us. His name is Toby, and he's so cute.
Yeah, an outdoor cat's great. Yeah, I used to have an outdoor cat in medical school. It was rather impossible to have a dog in medical school, as you can imagine. Um, yeah, so outdoor cats do the same thing. And they bring in all of these wonderful, bacteria and fungi from their traipsings around into you. And let your cat and your dog kiss you and lick you and inoculate you. It's a really good thing.
Cool.
The other thing that I have to tell any mother with a 4-year-old, as you've learned already, is value your sleep above almost everything. And we have to have downtime to repair all of our bodily systems, not just our brain. And I've written about that in the last 3 books, and this book as well. You have to have downtime for repairing not only your brain, but also the wall of your gut. And one of the things that I think we forget is we should not be constantly eating while we're awake. That our gut actually needs time to not work. Digesting food and absorbing food is actually very hard on our gut wall. And the more time we spend not eating, the better off we're going to be. And this has been shown in human studies. It's been shown in rhesus monkey studies. It's been shown in rat studies that downtime of not eating incredibly life and health span prolonging. So just don't eat 16 hours a day like most Americans.
And where can people find you and get your books and maybe see you in person?
Yeah, so I still see patients 6 days a week. I have offices in Palm Springs and Santa Barbara, where I am today. And you can go to drgundry.com. You can go to gundrymd.com, my supplement and food company. I've got the Dr. Gundry Podcast, so wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Hopefully, while you're scrolling through the internet, I pop up and wave at you if I'm doing everything right. So, and the current book, Gut Check, just came out last week. Wherever books are sold, preferably go to your local bookstore. And, go to your local bookstore, but you can go to Barnes and Noble, help them out.
Yes, Dr. Gundry, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Orion, and go take care of your 4-year-old and get some sleep.
Well, I'll do my best. And thank you, listeners. Remember to get a dog or a cat. Value your sleep so you can repair your brain and your gut. Give your gut a rest and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.